Sergeant Donald Morgan's heart raced as he locked eyes with the breathtaking Talarian female, her iridescent skin shimmering in the alien sunlight. No human had ever dared to get close to these ethereal beauties, but Donald felt an irresistible pull towards her. The recently colonized planet of Talaria Prime bustled with activity as Donald stepped off the transport ship. The air was thick with the scent of unfamiliar flora and the distant hum of mining operations. As a decorated human soldier, Donald had seen his fair share of alien worlds, but nothing quite like this. The human military outpost stood as a stark contrast to the organic architecture of the Talarian capital city. Donald's fellow soldiers moved with purpose, their weapons at the ready. The atmosphere was tense, a palpable undercurrent of unease between the human colonists and the native Talarians. During his first patrol of the alien capital, Donald's gaze was drawn to a figure that seemed to glow from within. Orin, a Talarian female, stood out even among her own kind. Her skin shimmered with iridescent hues, and bioluminescent markings pulsed gently along her arms and face. Donald felt his breath catch in his throat. "Watch yourself, Sergeant," a gruff voice warned. Donald turned to see his patrol partner, Private Chen, eyeing him warily. "Remember the no-contact policy. These aliens don't take kindly to touching." Donald nodded, recalling the briefing he'd received upon arrival. The Talarians believed physical contact with other species to be spiritually and physically harmful. This cultural taboo had created an insurmountable barrier between Talarians and other races, despite the desires of many. As they continued their patrol, Donald observed the careful dance of humans and Talarians in the shared spaces of the city. The two species moved around each other like opposing magnets, never touching, barely even looking at one another. The strict no-contact policy enforced by the human military command loomed over every interaction. Back at the outpost, Donald met with Governor Marcus Holt, a stern-faced man with worry lines etched deep into his forehead. "Sergeant Morgan," Holt began, "I hope you understand the delicacy of our situation here. The rare minerals we mine on Talaria Prime are crucial for Earth's technological advancements. We cannot afford any missteps." Donald listened intently as Holt explained the rising tensions between humans and Talarians. Disputes over mining rights and cultural misunderstandings threatened to unravel years of careful diplomacy. The governor's eyes bore into Donald as he spoke his next words. "Your record speaks for itself, Sergeant. Your charisma and diplomatic skills are exactly what we need right now. I'm tasking you with improving our relations with the Talarian leadership. Can I count on you?" Donald straightened his posture. "Yes, sir. I won't let you down." As he left the governor's office, Donald's mind raced with the enormity of his task. He couldn't shake the image of Orin from his thoughts, her otherworldly beauty calling to him like a siren's song. Little did he know that their paths would soon cross again, setting in motion a chain of events that would challenge everything he thought he knew about duty, desire, and the delicate balance between two worlds. Donald's new assignment came sooner than he expected. Just days after his meeting with Governor Holt, he found himself standing at attention in the ornate antechamber of the Talarian High Council. The air hummed with an electric tension as human and Talarian officials filed into the room, their movements careful and deliberate to avoid any accidental contact. Governor Holt's voice cut through the silence. "Sergeant Morgan, I need you on high alert. This meeting could make or break our alliance." Donald nodded, his eyes scanning the room. He caught sight of Orin among the Talarian delegates, her iridescent skin pulsing with what he interpreted as nervous energy. Their gazes met for a brief moment before she looked away, her bioluminescent markings flickering rapidly. As the delegates took their seats, Donald positioned himself near the entrance, his hand resting lightly on his holstered weapon. The negotiations began, Governor Holt's measured tones contrasting sharply with the melodic timbre of the Talarian High Counselor. Suddenly, a deafening boom shook the chamber. The force of the explosion knocked Donald off his feet, debris raining down around him. Through the choking dust and smoke, he heard screams of pain and confusion. As his training kicked in, Donald scrambled to his feet, eyes darting around the chaos. That's when he saw it, a dark figure moving with purpose through the debris, heading straight for Orin. Time seemed to slow. Donald saw the glint of a weapon in the assailant's hand. Without hesitation, he lunged forward, closing the distance in 3 long strides. He tackled the masked figure just as they raised their arm to strike. They hit the ground hard, Donald's momentum carrying them both away from Oren. As they grappled, Donald felt the assailant's skin beneath his hands. Smooth and cool. Definitely Talarian. The realization sent a jolt through him, but he pushed it aside, focusing on subduing the attacker. With a swift move, Donald pinned the assassin to the ground, swiftly disarming them. It was only then, as the dust began to settle, that he became aware of the stunned silence that had fallen over the chamber. He looked up to see Oren standing just feet away, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and something else. Gratitude, curiosity. Donald couldn't be sure, but as the reality of what he'd done sank in, he felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. He'd broken the no-contact rule. In saving Oren's life, he might have just ignited a diplomatic firestorm. The next few hours passed in a blur of shouting, accusations, and frantic comm calls. Donald found himself confined to his quarters, the weight of his actions pressing down on him. Through his window, he could see increased patrols of both human and Talarian security forces, the atmosphere tense with the threat of violence. As night fell, a soft knock at his door startled Donald from his brooding. He opened it cautiously, surprised to find Oren standing there, her bioluminescent markings dimmed to a soft glow. "Sergeant Morgan," she whispered, her voice carrying a musical quality that sent shivers down his spine. "I had to see you, to thank you for what you did." Donald stepped back, allowing her to enter while maintaining a careful distance. "I was just doing my job," he replied, trying to ignore the way his heart raced at her proximity. Oren's eyes searched his face. "You touched me," she said softly. "You broke our most sacred law to save my life. It has made me question everything I thought I knew." Before Donald could respond, his comm unit buzzed. Colonel Blackwell's gruff voice filled the room. "Morgan, report to my office immediately. We've got a situation." In Blackwell's office, Donald stood at attention as the colonel paced behind his desk. "What I am about to tell you doesn't leave this room," Blackwell growled. "The explosion wasn't just a terrorist attack. It was part of a larger conspiracy, and we need you to uncover the truth." Donald listened intently as Blackwell laid out the evidence they'd gathered so far, hints of a plot involving both human and Talarian extremists. The colonel's eyes narrowed as he delivered his final instruction. "Your connection with the Talarian female, Oren, could be crucial to this investigation. But tread carefully, Morgan. Any further contact could jeopardize everything we've built here." As Donald left Blackwell's office, his mind raced with the implications of his new mission. He thought of Oren, of the way her skin had felt beneath his hands during those chaotic moments in the council chamber. He knew he was treading a dangerous line, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the key to unraveling this conspiracy, and perhaps to bridging the gap between their species, lay in challenging the very taboos that had kept them apart. With a deep breath, Donald set out into the alien night, the twin moons of Talaria Prime casting an eerie glow over the city. He had a mystery to solve, a war to prevent, and perhaps a chance to forge a connection that could change everything. As Donald set out into the alien night, the situation on Talaria Prime deteriorated rapidly. The explosion at the High Council meeting had shattered the fragile peace between humans and Talarians, and rumors of conspiracy spread like wildfire through both communities. Within days, Governor Marcus Holt made the difficult decision to evacuate non-essential human personnel. The spaceport buzzed with activity as civilian workers and their families boarded transports bound for Earth. Donald watched from his quarters, still under house arrest for his actions during the attack. A sharp knock on his door broke the silence. Colonel Victor Blackwell entered, his face grim. "Morgan, we're in deep. The Talarian High Counselor, Zar Ek, has issued an ultimatum. Either we leave the planet entirely, or they'll consider it an act of war." Donald's face hardened. "Sir, there's more going on here than meets the eye. The attack, the tensions. It can't be coincidence." Blackwell nodded. "That's why I'm here. I need you to continue your investigation, off the books. Find out who's behind this and why. It might be our only chance to prevent all-out war." "But sir, I'm under house arrest. How am I supposed to—" The colonel cut him off. "As of now, you're no longer under arrest. You'll be operating covertly. Use your training, stay out of sight. I'll arrange for your escape tonight." As Blackwell left, Donald's mind raced. He thought of Oren, wondering if she was safe amidst the chaos. He pushed the thought aside, focusing on the task at hand. Under cover of darkness, Donald slipped out of the human settlement. He made his way to a prearranged meeting point where he found a small group waiting for him, a mix of humans and Talarians. A human woman stepped forward. "Sergeant Morgan, I'm Dr. Eleanor Reeves, xenobiologist. We believe in the Alliance and want to help." Donald's eyes widened. "Reeves? Any relation to Maxwell Reeves, the Stellar Dynamics CEO?" Elena's expression hardened. "My estranged brother, and the reason I'm here. I have information about his activities on Talaria Prime, activities that could explain the recent tensions." Over the next hour, Elena shared what she knew. Stellar Dynamics had established a secret facility on the planet, conducting illegal experiments on Talarian biology. The implications were staggering. "We've pinpointed the location," Elena said, handing Donald a data chip. "But it's heavily guarded. Getting in won't be easy." Donald studied the facility schematics. "I'll find a way." Infiltrating the compound proved even more challenging than anticipated. Donald used every ounce of his training, evading patrols and bypassing security systems. Finally, he reached the central lab. What he found there chilled him to the bone. Holographic displays showed the molecular structure of a bioweapon, specifically designed to target Talarian physiology. In an adjacent room, he discovered data archives that revealed an even more shocking truth. The Talarians' aversion to physical contact wasn't natural. It was an artificially induced condition, created ages ago to protect against an alien pathogen. As Donald downloaded the evidence, alarms blared. He turned to find Maxwell Reeves himself standing in the doorway, flanked by armed mercenaries. "Sergeant Morgan," Reeves said, his voice cold, "I'm afraid I can't let you leave with that information." Donald's combat instincts kicked in. He dove for cover as the mercenaries opened fire, scrambling to find a way out. The ensuing battle was fierce, with Donald using his knowledge of the facility's layout to outmaneuver his opponents. During the fight, a stray shot shattered a containment unit. Donald felt a mist envelop him, burning his skin. He pushed through the pain, finally breaking free of the facility and disappearing into the wilderness. As he made his escape, Donald felt strange sensations coursing through his body. His skin tingled, and his senses seemed heightened. Whatever he'd been exposed to was changing him, altering his body at a cellular level. Meanwhile, in the Talarian capital, Oren paced in her quarters. She'd been placed under house arrest after the attack, her father furious at her interaction with the human soldier. But as reports of growing hostilities reached her, she knew she couldn't stay idle. Using her knowledge of Talarian security systems and her position as a cultural liaison, Oren managed to slip away undetected. She made her way towards the human settlement, determined to find Donald and help uncover the truth. As dawn broke over Talaria Prime, Donald found himself at a crossroads. The evidence he carried could prevent a war, but with Stellar Dynamics mercenaries having infiltrated both the human military and colonial government, he didn't know who to trust. His body continued to change, each passing hour bringing new sensations and abilities. He realized that this transformation might be the key to bridging the gap between humans and Talarians, if he could only reach the right people in time. In the distance, Donald saw the gleaming spires of the human settlement. Somewhere within its walls were the answers he sought, and quite possibly, Oren. With rekindled dedication, he set off toward the city, knowing that the fate of two species hung in the balance. "Balance," Donald pressed forward, his mind racing with the implications of what he'd discovered. The evidence he carried could prevent a war, but with Stellar Dynamics mercenaries having infiltrated both the human military and colonial government, he didn't know who to trust. His body continued to change, each passing hour bringing new sensations and abilities. He realized that this transformation might be the key to bridging the gap between humans and Talarians, if he could only reach the right people in time. As he approached the outskirts of the human settlement, a familiar figure emerged from the shadows. Oren stood before him, her bioluminescent markings pulsing with urgency. "Donald," she whispered, relief evident in her melodic voice, "I've been searching for you." Before Donald could respond, movement caught his eye. A group of heavily armed men in Stellar Dynamics uniforms appeared on the horizon, closing in fast. "We need to move," Donald said, grabbing Oren's arm instinctively. To his surprise, she didn't flinch at his touch. There was no time to dwell on this development as they sprinted away from the approaching mercenaries. Scanning their surroundings, Donald spotted an abandoned structure in the distance. "There," he pointed. "That old mining facility. We can hide there." They raced across the barren landscape, the sound of pursuit growing closer. Reaching the facility, they slipped inside, the musty air filled with the scent of disused machinery and mineral deposits. As they caught their breath, Donald turned to Oren. "I need to tell you what I've found," he said, his voice low and urgent. He quickly recounted his discoveries, the bioweapon, the truth about the Talarian's touch aversion, and Stellar Dynamics' involvement. Oren's eyes widened as she processed the information. "This changes everything," she said, her markings flickering with a mix of emotions. "But how can we convince our people? They're on the brink of war." Before Donald could answer, a wave of pain racked his body. He doubled over, gritting his teeth as the experimental compound continued its work. His skin rippled, muscles contorting beneath the surface. Oren moved closer, concern etched on her features. "Donald, what's happening to you?" Through clenched teeth, he explained about his exposure at the Stellar Dynamics facility. As another spasm hit, Oren instinctively reached out, her hand grasping his. They both froze, realizing what had just happened. Oren's cool, smooth skin pressed against Donald's without any adverse reaction. The pain momentarily forgotten, they stared at their joined hands in wonder. "How is this possible?" Oren whispered, her voice filled with awe. Donald flexed his fingers, marveling at the sensation. "The compound must have altered my physiology enough to make contact safe," he said, a mix of excitement and trepidation in his voice. Their eyes met, and in that moment, the full weight of their situation crashed down upon them. This discovery could change everything, not just for them, but for both their species. Their contemplation was cut short by the distant sound of an explosion. Rushing to a grimy window, they saw smoke rising from a Talarian settlement on the horizon. "No!" Oren gasped, her markings pulsing with distress. Donald's eyebrows furrowed. "Reeves," he growled. "He's framing the human military, pushing us closer to war." As if on cue, Donald's comm unit crackled to life. Colonel Blackwell's voice came through, tense and urgent. "All personnel, be advised. We've received an ultimatum from the Talarian High Council. We have 24 hours to leave the planet or face military action. Prepare for potential evacuation or conflict." Donald and Oren exchanged grim looks. Time was running out. "We need to split up," Donald said, his mind racing. "I'll take the evidence to Blackwell. Try to expose the conspiracy from within. You need to get back to the Talarian capital. Convince your father of the truth." Oren nodded, her expression determined. "Agreed. But how will we get past the mercenaries outside?" As if in answer, the facility's entrance exploded inward. Through the dust and debris strode Captain Jared Vance, Maxwell Reeves's second-in-command, flanked by a squad of heavily armed mercenaries. "Well, well," Vance sneered, his weapon trained on Donald and Oren. "Looks like we've caught ourselves a traitor and his alien girlfriend." Donald's muscles tensed, ready for action. Beside him, Oren's markings flashed with defiance. As Vance opened his mouth to speak again, Donald made his move. With speed that surprised even him, Donald lunged forward, closing the distance to Vance in a heartbeat. His enhanced strength sent the captain flying across the room. Oren, quick to catch on, grabbed a piece of mining equipment, wielding it like a staff. The room erupted into chaos. Mercenaries opened fire, their shots going wide as Donald and Oren weaved through the machinery. Donald felt the compound in his system surging, granting him reflexes and strength beyond anything he'd experienced before. Oren proved equally formidable. Her knowledge of Talarian technology allowed her to quickly repurpose mining tools into makeshift weapons. Together, they fought in perfect synchronization, their newfound ability to touch enabling coordinated attacks that left the mercenaries reeling. As they gained the upper hand, Vance's voice cut through the din. "Enough!" he roared, his finger hovering over a detonator. "This ends now." The explosion rocked the facility, bringing down supports and sending debris raining from above. Donald grabbed Orin, shielding her with his body as they ran for the exit. They burst out of the collapsing structure, coughing and covered in dust. Their relief was short-lived. As the dust settled, they found themselves surrounded. On one side stood a contingent of Talarian forces, their weapons glowing with scarcely controlled energy. On the other, human soldiers leveled their rifles, fingers tense on triggers. Between these two groups, Maxwell Reeves appeared, flanked by a mix of corrupt human officials and Talarian separatists. His eyes gleamed with malicious triumph as he surveyed the scene. "Perfect timing," Reeves said, his voice carrying across the tense silence. "Now we can put an end to this farce of an alliance once and for all." Donald and Orin stood back to back, caught between the forces they had each sworn to protect. The evidence that could save both their peoples burdened immensely in Donald's pocket. As weapons on both sides hummed with deadly intent, they knew their next actions would determine the fate of two worlds. The standoff intensified, the air crackling with tension. Donald's enhanced senses picked up every detail: the nervous sweat of the human soldiers, the rapid pulsing of the Talarians' bioluminescent markings. One wrong move could ignite a conflict that would consume both species. Reeves stepped forward, his face a mask of false concern. "You see," he called out to both sides, "this human has corrupted one of their own, turning her against her people. And now they conspire to destroy us all." Donald felt Orin tense behind him. He knew they had to act fast, but with weapons trained on them from all sides, their options were limited. The truth burned in his pocket, but how could they reveal it before Reeves provoked a war? As the tension reached a fever pitch, Donald's mind raced, searching for a way to bridge the gap between their peoples and expose Reeves's lies before it was too late. Donald's mind raced, searching for a solution. He locked eyes with Orin, a silent understanding passing between them. In that moment, he knew what he had to do. "Hold your fire!" Donald's voice rang out, clear and commanding. The authority in his tone caused both human and Talarian forces to hesitate. "I have evidence that will change everything you think you know about this conflict." Colonel Blackwell stepped forward, his brow furrowed. "Sergeant Morgan, explain yourself." Donald produced the data files he'd stolen from Stellar Dynamics. "Sir, I have proof that Maxwell Reeves and his corporation are behind the attacks on both our settlements. They've been manipulating us, pushing us towards war." As murmurs rippled through the gathered forces, Orin spoke up, her melodic voice carrying across the tense silence. "Father," she addressed Zarek, who stood at the forefront of the Talarian contingent, "the humans are not our enemy. Our inability to touch, it's not natural. It was artificially induced ages ago, and Stellar Dynamics has been exploiting this to create conflict between our peoples." Zarek's bioluminescent markings pulsed with confusion and disbelief. "Daughter, these are grave accusations. What proof do you have?" Before Orin could respond, a new voice cut through the chaos. "I can corroborate their claims." Dr. Elena Reeves emerged from behind the human lines, her face set with persistence. She carried a briefcase, which she opened to reveal a trove of documents and data drives. "My brother's company has been developing a bioweapon," Elena explained, her voice steady despite the gravity of her words. "They've been orchestrating attacks on both sides, framing each species for the other's suffering. I have irrefutable evidence of their involvement." As Elena presented her findings, the atmosphere shifted palpably. Doubt crept into the eyes of soldiers on both sides, their weapons lowering slightly as the truth began to sink in. Maxwell Reeves, sensing his plan unraveling, barked an order into his comm unit. "Vance, release the payload now, all of it." Captain Jared Vance's voice crackled over the comm, hesitation evident in his tone. "Sir, are you sure? The casualties would be—" "Do it, damn you!" Reeves roared. Donald's enhanced hearing picked up the exchange. He sprang into action, his voice carrying an urgency that commanded attention. "We need to stop that bioweapon release now. Colonel Blackwell, Governor Holt, We need a joint task force to secure the stellar dynamics facilities immediately. To Donald's surprise, Zarek stepped forward. I will commit Talarian forces to this endeavor. If what you say is true, we cannot allow this weapon to be deployed. As the impromptu alliance mobilized, Orin approached Dr. Elena Reeves. Doctor, is there any way to counteract this bioweapon? Elena's eyes lit up with a spark of hope. Possibly. Your friend Donald's altered physiology might be the key. If we can synthesize an antidote based on his genetic changes, we could protect both humans and Talarians. Orin nodded, her markings pulsing with purpose. Then let's get to work. As the joint task force prepared to move out, a shuttle roared to life behind the stellar dynamics lines. Donald spotted Maxwell Reeves boarding, clutching a metal case that undoubtedly contained samples of the bioweapon. He's getting away, Donald shouted, already sprinting towards the rising shuttle. Colonel Blackwell's voice cut through the commotion. Morgan, stop Reeves at all costs. We can't let him escape with that weapon. Donald's enhanced muscles propelled him forward with incredible speed. He leaped, catching hold of the shuttle's landing gear just as it lifted off. The vessel lurched, then shot forward, carrying Donald into a high-stakes aerial pursuit. The shuttle weaved through towering rock formations and plunged into deep canyons, the pilot clearly familiar with Talaria Prime's treacherous landscape. Donald clung to the undercarriage, the wind whipping at his face as he calculated his next move. Inside the shuttle, he could hear Reeves shouting orders, panic edging into his voice. The craft dipped low, skimming the surface of an ancient Talarian ruin. Donald seized the opportunity, swinging himself onto a crumbling stone platform. As he regained his footing, his comm unit crackled to life. Orin's voice came through, urgent and filled with hope. Donald, we've made a breakthrough with the antidote, but we need you here. Your altered physiology is the key to synthesizing enough to protect everyone. Donald's heart raced. He watched Reeves's shuttle disappearing into the distance, the bioweapon sample still on board. The weight of his decision pressed down on him, lives hanging in the balance. Before he could respond, another voice cut in. Captain Jared Vance. This is Vance. I'm turning myself in. I'll testify against Reeves, and I can tell you where he's going. The unexpected development sent Donald's legs shaking. With Vance's intelligence, they might be able to intercept Reeves later. But the antidote... Donald's comm unit beeped again. Colonel Blackwell's gruff voice came through. Morgan, do you copy? Your orders are to apprehend Reeves. That bioweapon cannot leave the planet. Donald stood on the ancient Talarian platform, the weight of two worlds pressing down on his shoulders. Reeves's shuttle was a diminishing speck on the horizon. Behind him, the joint human Talarian forces were mobilizing, ready to secure the stellar dynamics facilities. And somewhere in the capital, Orin and Dr. Reeves waited, the fate of both species potentially resting on his return. With the clock ticking and lives hanging in the balance, Donald took a deep breath, his enhanced muscles tensing as he prepared to make a decision that would shape the future of Talaria Prime. Prime, the weight of two worlds pressed down on his shoulders as he made his decision. Colonel Blackwell, Donald spoke into his comm unit, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. I need to return to assist with the antidote synthesis. Request backup to continue pursuit of Reeves. There was a moment of tense silence before Blackwell's gruff voice came through. Understood, Morgan. I'm dispatching a team of our best to take over the chase. Get back to that lab and do whatever it takes to stop this bioweapon. Relief flooded through Donald as he turned away from the ancient ruins, his enhanced muscles propelling him back towards the makeshift research facility. The shuttle carrying Reeves was long gone, but Donald pushed the thought from his mind. He had a new mission now, one that could save countless lives. As he approached the facility, he saw Orin waiting for him at the entrance, her bioluminescent markings pulsing with a mix of anxiety and hope. Dr. Elena Reeves stood beside her, clutching a datapad filled with complex formulas. Donald, Orin called out as he drew near, we've made progress, but we need you to complete the synthesis. Without wasting a moment, Donald followed them into the lab. The room was a flurry of activity, with human and Talarian scientists working side by side, their previous mistrust set aside in the face of impending disaster. Dr. Reeves immediately began preparing equipment for DNA extraction. "Your altered physiology is the key," she explained, her voice tense but focused. "The compound in your system has created a unique genetic marker that could neutralize the bioweapon's effects on both human and Talarian biology." As Donald sat down to have his blood drawn, reports began flooding in from across the planet. Oren's markings flashed with distress as she read the incoming data. "It's starting," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Isolated cases of the bioweapon's effects are appearing in both human and Talarian settlements." Donald felt a chill run down his spine. The race against time had truly begun. In the Joint Command Center, Governor Holt and Zarek stood side by side, their previous animosity forgotten as they coordinated their response to the crisis. Holographic displays showed the spread of the bioweapon, red dots peppering the map of Talaria Prime. "We need to implement immediate quarantine procedures," Holt said, his face grim. Zarek nodded, his markings pulsing with agreement. "An evacuation of unaffected areas. We must contain this before it spreads further." As they worked, a communication came through from Captain Jared Vance. His face appeared on the main screen, haggard and filled with remorse. "I have information about the bioweapons delivery systems," Vance said, his voice hoarse. "There are hidden caches across the planet. If we can locate and disable them, we might be able to prevent widespread contamination." Holt and Zarek exchanged a look. It was a glimmer of hope in an increasingly dire situation. "Send us the data," Zarek commanded. "We'll dispatch joint teams immediately." Back in the lab, Donald's body began to exhibit unexpected changes. As Dr. Reeves examined his latest blood samples, she gasped in surprise. "This is extraordinary," she murmured, peering into a microscope. "Donald, your skin, it's developing a faint iridescence, similar to the Talarians." Oren leaned in, her markings pulsing with curiosity. "And his cellular structure, it's adapting to perceive our bioluminescent communication." Donald held up his hand, marveling at the subtle shimmer now visible on his skin. He turned to Oren, suddenly aware of a new layer of information in the pulsing of her markings. "I can understand you," he said, awe in his voice. "Not just your words, but the nuances in your bioluminescence." Dr. Reeves's eyes lit up. "This could be the breakthrough we need. Donald, with your ability to interpret Talarian biological signals, we might be able to accelerate the antidote's production." They worked tirelessly, the hours blending together as they raced against the clock. Outside, reports continued to come in of the bioweapons spread, each new case adding urgency to their task. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Dr. Reeves held up a vial of clear liquid. "We've done it," she announced, her voice filled with cautious optimism. "A prototype antidote." The team gathered around as she began initial tests. The tension in the room was palpable as they waited for the results. When they came, however, the elation quickly turned to disappointment. "It's only partially effective," Dr. Reeves said, her brow furrowed as she examined the data. "It's not enough to fully counteract the bioweapon's effects." Oren's markings flashed with frustration. "What do we need to make it work?" Dr. Reeves's face was grim as she answered. "A pure sample of the original bioweapon. Without it, we can't create a fully functioning cure." The implications hung heavy in the air. The only known sample was currently in the possession of Maxwell Reeves, who was still evading capture. As if on cue, Donald's comm unit crackled to life. Colonel Blackwell's voice came through, tense and urgent. "Morgan, we've cornered Reeves. He's taken refuge in an ancient Talarian temple in the Korthal Mountains. But we've got a problem. The temple's considered sacred by the Talarians. A direct assault could destroy any chance of peace between our people." Donald looked at Oren, an idea forming in his mind. With his new Talarian traits and her knowledge of the ancient temples, they might have a chance to infiltrate the structure and apprehend Reeves without causing further damage to human-Talarian relations. "Colonel," Donald replied, his voice firm with persistence, "I have a plan, but we're going to need support from both sides." As he outlined his proposal, Donald knew they were about to embark on their most dangerous mission yet. With the fate of two species hanging in the balance, failure was not an option. Donald's eyes met Oren's, a silent understanding passing between them. "We're going in," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of their mission. Colonel Blackwell's voice crackled through the comm once more. "Godspeed, Morgan. We're counting on you." Within minutes, Donald and Oren had assembled a small team of human and Talarian specialists. As they approached the ancient Talarian temple, nestled in the Korthal Mountains, the true scale of their task became apparent. The temple's facade was a masterpiece of Talarian architecture, its sweeping lines and iridescent surfaces belying the deadly security measures hidden within. Donald's newly developed Talarian traits proved invaluable as they neared the outer defenses. He could now perceive faint pulses of bioluminescence emanating from seemingly innocuous patterns on the temple walls. "Wait," he whispered, holding up a hand to halt the team. "There's a security grid here. Oren, can you see it?" Oren's markings flashed with surprise. "Yes, but how can you?" Donald glanced at his shimmering skin. "Looks like these changes are more than cosmetic. I can see the energy signatures." Working in tandem, Donald and Oren guided the team through the invisible maze of security beams. As they reached the temple entrance, they encountered their first glimpse of Reeves's modern additions, a state-of-the-art biometric scanner guarding the main door. One of the human specialists, a tech expert named Dr. Yara Chen, stepped forward. "I can bypass this, but it'll take time." "Time we don't have," Donald muttered, eyeing the scanner. On an impulse, he pressed his hand against the smooth surface. To everyone's astonishment, the scanner hummed to life, its display flashing green. The massive stone doors began to slide open. Oren's markings pulsed with a mixture of awe and concern. "Donald, your physiology, it's changing more rapidly than we anticipated." As they entered the temple, the team found themselves in a vast atrium. What initially appeared to be ornate decorations revealed themselves as dormant technological marvels. Holographic interfaces flickered to life as they passed, responding to Donald's presence. "This isn't just a temple," Dr. Chen breathed, her eyes wide. "It's a research facility, and it's more advanced than anything I've ever seen." Their wonder was short-lived. A high-pitched whine filled the air as automated security drones sprang to life, their metallic bodies gleaming in the dim light. Energy barriers materialized, cutting off their escape route. "Reeves knows we're here," Donald shouted over the chaos. "Oren, we need to split up. You and I will try to find another way to Reeves. The rest of you, hold this position and try to disable those drones." As energy blasts ricocheted around them, Donald and Oren sprinted down a side corridor. The temple's layout was a maze of twisting passages and hidden chambers, each more perplexing than the last. They paused to catch their breath in a small antechamber. Oren's markings flickered rapidly, a sign of her agitation. "Donald, look at this." A holographic display had activated on the wall. As they watched, it played out scenes from ancient Talarian history. Donald's eyes widened as he saw Talarians touching freely, without fear or hesitation. The touch aversion, it wasn't always part of your culture, he realized. Oren nodded, her expression a mix of wonder and sadness. This facility, it must have been where our ancestors conducted their research, but what were they trying to achieve? Their contemplation was cut short by the sound of approaching drones. They pressed on, delving deeper into the heart of the ancient facility. As they navigated the labyrinthine corridors, Donald felt a strange sensation building within him. His perception seemed to sharpen, his reflexes becoming even more heightened. When they encountered a sealed door with an intricate Talarian interface, Donald found he could interact with it instinctively. "It's like I can feel the system's pathways," he murmured as the door slid open. Oren's markings pulsed with concern. "Donald, your connection to our technology is growing stronger. We need to be careful. We don't know what prolonged exposure might do to you." They pressed on, aware that time was running out. Back on the surface, reports flooded in of the bioweapon's escalating effects. In the command center, Governor Holt and Zarek worked tirelessly to coordinate evacuation efforts and support Dr. Elena Reeves's ongoing work. Captain Jared Vance, his face etched with willpower, led teams into the most affected areas. The prototype antidote, while not a cure, helped slow the bioweapon's spread. But it wasn't enough. They needed the pure sample, and they needed it soon. Deep within the temple, Donald and Orin finally reached a massive central chamber. At its center stood Maxwell Reeves, his hands flying over the controls of an enormous Talarian supercomputer. "You're too late," Reeves called out, his eyes wild with a mixture of fear and triumph. "With this knowledge, I'll reshape both our worlds." Donald stepped forward, his body humming with newfound power. "It's over, Reeves. Surrender the bioweapon sample." Reeves snarled, activating the chamber's defense systems. Energy beams crisscrossed the room as automated turrets emerged from hidden compartments. Donald moved with inhuman speed, dodging blasts and using his enhanced strength to destroy the nearest turrets. Orin, her markings flashing with concentration, worked to counteract Reeves's control over the ancient systems. In the chaos of the battle, a stray energy blast struck the containment unit holding the pure bioweapon sample. The canister cracked, a faint hiss indicating the imminent release of its deadly contents. Donald's heart raced. Without thinking, he leapt towards the supercomputer, his hands connecting with its smooth surface. A surge of energy coursed through him as he interfaced directly with the ancient system. Information flooded his mind, millennia of Talarian knowledge and technological advancements. Through the haze of data, Donald focused on overriding Reeves's control. Reeves stumbled back from the console, his face contorted with rage. "No, you don't understand what you're doing." As Donald maintained his connection to the supercomputer, Orin sprinted towards the damaged bioweapon canister. Reeves, seeing his plans crumbling, made a desperate lunge for a data drive containing a partial download of the supercomputer's database. "Orin, stop him!" Donald shouted, his mind still linked to the ancient system. Orin launched herself at Reeves, their bodies colliding as they tumbled towards the chamber's exit. The temple shuddered, systems overloading from the strain of Donald's interference. Donald gritted his teeth, fighting to maintain control long enough to secure the bioweapon sample. As his consciousness swam with Talarian knowledge, he glimpsed something that made his blood run cold, the true nature of the bioweapon and its terrifying potential. With a final surge of effort, Donald broke his connection to the supercomputer. He staggered towards the damaged canister, aware that the fate of both species now rested in his hands. As he reached for the volatile sample, he heard Orin's shout echoing from the collapsing corridor. "Donald, Reeves is escaping!" Clutching the bioweapon container, Donald sprinted after them. The temple groaned around him, ancient stone and advanced technology buckling under the strain of system failure. He ran, driven by the knowledge that the key to saving both humans and Talarians lay within his grasp. If only he could reach Orin and stop Reeves before it was too late. Too late. The temple shuddered violently, chunks of ancient stone raining down around them. Donald's enhanced reflexes kicked in as he sprinted through the collapsing corridors. His newly acquired Talarian traits allowed him to process information at an incredible speed, helping him navigate the treacherous path ahead. He clutched the damaged bioweapon container tightly, acutely aware of its volatile contents. As he rounded a corner, he spotted Orin cornering Maxwell Reeves near what appeared to be an emergency escape pod. Reeves, his face contorted with desperation, fumbled with the pod's controls. A chasm opened up in the floor between Donald and the others, widening rapidly. Without hesitation, Donald gathered his strength and leaped. Time seemed to slow as he soared over the gap, his body moving with a grace and power he'd never experienced before. He landed beside Orin and Reeves just as the rogue scientist's fingers brushed the pod's activation panel. In one fluid motion, Donald grabbed Reeves's wrist, twisting it away from the controls. "It's over, Reeves," Donald growled, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. Reeves struggled against Donald's grip, his eyes wild with fear and anger. "You don't understand what you're destroying, the power we could wield." Orin cut him off, her markings flashing with intensity as she snatched a data drive from Reeves's other hand. "The only thing being destroyed here is your twisted ambition." The temple groaned ominously, the ancient structure giving way under the strain of technological overload. Donald made a split-second decision. "Into the pod now!" he shouted, shoving Reeves inside and motioning for Orin to follow. They piled in, the tight space barely accommodating the three of them. Donald's fingers flew over the unfamiliar controls, his newfound connection to Talarian technology guiding his actions. The pod's hatch sealed shut just as the temple's main chamber imploded. They felt the shockwave reverberate through the pod's hull as it launched, catapulting them into the sky. Through the small viewport, they watched in awe and horror as the ancient Talarian temple, with all its technological marvels and historical significance, sank into the ground. Centuries of advanced knowledge disappeared in moments, leaving behind a cloud of dust and debris. As they soared away from the mountain, an uneasy silence fell over the pod's occupants. Reeves sat slumped in a corner, defeat etched on his face. Oren kept a watchful eye on him while examining the data drive they'd recovered. Donald's mind raced, processing the information he'd absorbed from the Talarian supercomputer. The true nature of the bioweapon, its potential consequences, and possible countermeasures swirled in his thoughts. The pod's navigation system beeped, alerting them to their approach to the Joint Command Center. Donald guided the small craft to a landing, his hands steady despite the weight of responsibility he carried. As soon as the hatch opened, they were surrounded by a mix of human and Talarian security forces. Captain Jared Vance stepped forward, his face a mask of persistence as he took custody of Maxwell Reeves. Donald wasted no time. He rushed past the security cordon, carefully cradling the damaged bioweapon container. "Where's Dr. Elena Reeves?" he called out urgently. Governor Holt appeared, pointing towards a makeshift laboratory set up in a nearby building. "She's in there, working on the antidote. Did you—" But Donald was already moving, Oren close behind him. They burst into the lab, startling Dr. Elena Reeves and her team of human and Talarian scientists. "We have it," Donald announced, gently placing the container on a nearby workstation. "The pure sample." Dr. Reeves's eyes widened as she approached, her hands steady as she examined the cracked canister. "This is exactly what we needed. But how did you—" "There's more," Donald interrupted, tapping his temple. "I interfaced with an ancient Talarian supercomputer. I have information, formulas, molecular structures that could help." For the next several hours, the lab was a flurry of activity. Donald worked alongside Dr. Reeves and her team, his newfound knowledge proving invaluable in decoding the bioweapon's complex structure. Oren assisted where she could, her unique perspective as a Talarian often providing crucial insights. Outside, Governor Holt and Zarek coordinated their resources, preparing for large-scale production and distribution of the antidote. As the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, Dr. Reeves held up a vial of shimmering liquid. "We've done it," she announced, her voice hoarse from exhaustion but filled with hope. "A fully effective antidote." The lab erupted in cheers, the combined team of humans and Talarians embracing each other in a moment of shared triumph. Donald felt a wave of relief wash over him as Oren's hand slipped into his, their fingers intertwining. But their work was not nearly finished. Over the next few days, Donald found himself at the center of a whirlwind of activity. His unique physiology, now stabilized into a permanent blend of human and Talarian traits, made him an object of fascination for scientists from both species. More importantly, his transformation became a symbol of the new era dawning between humans and Talarians. As the antidote was mass-produced and distributed, saving countless lives, Donald worked tirelessly to bridge the gap between the two peoples. He watched with pride as Captain Jared Vance, granted leniency for his redemptive actions during the crisis, threw himself into rebuilding efforts. The captain's dedication to making amends seemed to inspire others, fostering a spirit of cooperation that spread rapidly. One evening, as Donald stood on a balcony overlooking the capital city, he sensed Oren's presence before she spoke. Her bioluminescent patterns pulsed in a rhythm that he now recognized as contentment. "Zarek and Governor Holt are announcing the revision of interspecies contact laws tomorrow," she said, stepping up beside him. "They're calling it the Morgan-Zarek Accord." Donald chuckled, shaking his head. "Your father's come a long way from wanting to banish me from the planet." Oren's markings flickered with amusement. "He's not the only one who's changed." She reached out, her fingers tracing the iridescent patterns on Donald's skin. "How does it feel?" "Different," Donald admitted, watching as his own bioluminescence responded to her touch. "But right somehow. Like this is who I was always meant to be. They stood in comfortable silence, watching as humans and Talarians mingled in the streets below. The city itself was transforming, blending architectural styles in a visual representation of their newfound harmony. "There's going to be a ceremony," Oren said softly, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "To officially recognize the first human Talarian couples. They want us to be part of it." Donald turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Oren, are you asking me to—" She silenced him with a kiss, her bioluminescent patterns flaring brightly. When they parted, her eyes sparkled with joy and mischief. "I believe I just did, Donald Morgan." As they embraced, their patterns synchronizing in a dazzling display, Donald marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. From a chance encounter in a mine to standing on the brink of a new era for both their peoples, their path had been anything but straightforward. Yet as he held Oren, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his chest, Donald knew that every challenge, every obstacle they'd faced had been worth it. Together, they'd helped forge a future brighter than either of them could have imagined. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple. As darkness fell, the city came alive with light, a harmonious blend of human technology and Talarian bioluminescence. Donald and Oren remained on the balcony, watching as their two worlds merged into one, ready to face whatever the future might bring.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.